kids, welcome back to some more science. Science is cool. This week, you are going to learn about another super cool outer space thing called the Space Transportation System, otherwise known as the Shuttle. This cool new rocket was made to take astronauts and supplies to another super cool space item that's zipping around above the Earth right now as we speak, called the International Space Station. So you're going to learn about the International Space Station. You're going to learn about the Space Transportation System. You're going to see some cool videos. And at the very end, you're going to make your very own space transportation system, huh? So let's get started, because science is cool. We saw from last week's video what it took to take people to the moon. It was quite a project, and it was super expensive. And on top of that, all of the stuff they built to take people to the moon couldn't be used again. That made it more expensive. On top of that, because the moon was so far, you had to have really big rockets, which meant that most of your weight was the rockets themselves and the fuel. And that meant you couldn't take a lot of stuff with you. Scientists weren't too happy about that. They wanted to be able to do experiments and find out what it was like to be in microgravity or no gravity. So it wasn't too long before they came up with the idea of let's make a way to stay in space all the time, a permanent presence, as they call it. What does that mean? It means that they want to build a way for people to stay in space and not have to just go up for a week and come back. And thus, the idea of the space station was born. Now, the idea of a space station wasn't so new. Russia had already had one, and we had a similar thing too, some smaller ideas. No, we're talking about something really big that people could live on and not be all squashed into like those little capsules, a place they'd eat and sleep and do experiments. Turns out that other countries had this idea too. So we all decided to get together and make an international space station, a place where lots of countries could come and work. Let's put their money together and do it together.
The International Space Station, or ISS, took many years to become a reality. This is the ISS as it looks today. It's mainly used to conduct science experiments that can only be done in space. There's usually 6 astronauts on board the station. They generally switch out about every 6 months so that no one spends too much time in space. The station is about the size of an American football field. It's located just outside the Earth's atmosphere. This is called low Earth orbit. It's not very high up, considering that some satellites orbit way out here. The ISS only takes about 92 minutes to orbit the Earth. That's about 28,000 kilometers per hour. Over time, the ISS will slowly lose altitude. If nothing was done, the station would eventually burn up as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. To prevent this, the station must be periodically reboosted to stay in space. The main countries now participating are United States, Canada, Russia, Japan, and many countries from the European Space Agency. Let's get to know the main parts of the station. The integrated truss structure is kind of like the backbone of the station. It holds the solar arrays to generate electricity, radiator panels, these remove heat from the station, and other equipment and science experiments are also attached. This part down here contains the pressurized modules, which means the astronauts can live and work in here without a spacesuit. All of the Russian modules make up the Russian orbital segment. The other side is called the United States orbital segment. It's made up of modules from the United States, Europe, Japan, and Canada.
So all these scientists from around the world spent a lot of time designing the space station. Meanwhile, there's another group of scientists working on the problems. Problem number 1. How do you get it up there? This thing is going to be huge. People are going to live inside of it. Better figure that out before you finish building it, right? Okay, let's think about it. Let's pretend your family decided to get a new swing set. You went to the hardware store and you saw a really super awesome huge swing set. How do you get it to your house? Well, of course, you have to take it apart and put it into your trunk piece by piece. You might have to make 1 or 2 trips to get that swing set home. Turns out that same idea was used on the space station. Can't bring this whole thing up at once, so scientists had to come up with a way to bring it up in pieces. The Saturn V rocket was not able to do that. So, the way they solved this, they built a new rocket. A rocket that had a trunk in it that could bring the space station up piece by piece.
The different pieces of the station, also called modules, were built in many locations around the globe. Each module was then launched into space by one of these 3 rockets: the American Space Shuttle, the Russian Proton rocket, and the Russian Soyuz rocket.
So as the video stated, there were 3 main ways to get people and supplies up to the International Space Station. This here that you see is called the Space Transportation System, and it was built by America. They built it to help bring parts up to build the space station, but it also brings supplies, new astronauts, satellites, and repair parts for things that are already up in Earth, like other satellites.
Space Shuttle consists of the orbiter vehicle, the orange external tank, and then the 2 white solid rocket boosters, or SRBs for short. The external tank is basically a big fuel container for the 3 main engines. The 2 SRBs each carry their own fuel. This is a partially reusable system. The orbiter and the 2 SRBs are reusable, but the external tank was not reusable. They had to make a new one for each mission. On most missions, it had a crew of 7 astronauts and stayed in space for 1 to 2 weeks. It is 37 meters long and 24 meters wide. For comparison, here is the Apollo spacecraft which landed astronauts on the moon. And here is a Boeing 747. The Space Shuttle was launched from Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The 2 SRBs did most of the work for the first 2 minutes. At that point, they were detached and fell back down to the Earth, where they would be recovered and used for a future mission. The 3 main engines are on their own for the next 6.5 minutes. After that, the orange external tank was separated and it fell down to the Earth, where it burned up in the atmosphere. At the end of a mission, the OMS motor fires up to slow the spacecraft down. It doesn't change the speed by much, but it's enough to send it on a path back through the atmosphere. And things are going to get a little hot. This part is called re-entry. Once we're close to the ground, the orbiter glides down to the runway. The wheels are extended, and the orbiter lands similar to an airplane. This red parachute helps to slow it down on the runway. Now remember, the orbiter is reusable. Before the space shuttle, launch vehicles were only designed to be used once. You had to build a new one for each mission. But with the space shuttle, the orbiter vehicle could be reused for many missions. There were 5 of them built to travel into space: Columbia, Challenger, Discovery, Atlantis, and Endeavour. And actually, there was another one called Enterprise, the very first orbiter to be built. This one never flew in space, but it was only used for tests here on Earth. Okay, now let's take a closer look at the payload bay. Once in orbit around the Earth, the payload bay doors are opened up to expose the inside. It's very important to get these doors open because they have radiator panels on the inside to help get rid of excess heat. The bay is big enough to fit a payload of up to 18 meters long and 4.6 meters in diameter. This was used to launch many satellites, including the Hubble Space Telescope. It was also used to launch modules for the International Space Station. On some missions, they carried a module called Space Lab, which has extra working space for science experiments. The astronauts can get in here by floating through the access tunnel. Along the left side of the cargo bay, there's a robotic arm called the Shuttle Remote Manipulator System, also known as the Canadarm. This was a contribution by Canada. It was operated from the controls at the back of the flight deck. They looked right through this window. The Canadarm was used to grab and move payloads around in space. It was also used to move astronauts around as well. Astronauts put their spacesuits on in the airlock. Then they can open up the hatch on the other side and go out into the vacuum of space. Later shuttle missions had the airlock in the middeck removed, and another one was installed inside of the payload bay. This is how the space shuttle was able to dock to the International Space Station. Once it's docked, the astronauts can freely float to and from the station. Now let's take a look at the inside, starting with the crew compartment. There are 3 levels in here: the flight deck, the mid-deck, and the equipment bay. The flight deck has the controls to fly the orbiter. The commander is on the left and the pilot is on the right. There are 2 more seats directly behind, but these will be stowed away for most of their time in space. The flight deck has a hole in the floor that leads down to the mid-deck. There's a ladder, but when you're in space, you can just float through. The mid-deck is where the crew eats, sleeps, and does some of their work. These are the lockers to store equipment and personal belongings of the astronauts. These are the sleep stations. It can fit 3 astronauts horizontally. More astronauts sleep in bags attached to the side here. There's no gravity in space, so sleeping is a bit different than here on Earth. This is the galley, used to prepare food. Don't forget about the bathroom in space. This is called the waste collection system. This is the airlock for when astronauts get in their spacesuits and then go outside to access the payload bay. The crew compartment here is the only pressurized part of the orbiter, which means it's the only part that astronauts can be in without a spacesuit. The side hatch is how they enter and leave the orbiter on Earth. The hatch is not used while they're in space. If they did, it would suck all the air out. Not good. When it's time for some of the astronauts to go outside, they'll use the airlock.
Life up on the International Space Station was very different than life on those Apollo capsules. Much more comfortable. These astronauts were up there for a long time, and so they needed some things. Number 1, they needed a bathroom this time. Do you remember the Apollo astronauts didn't actually have an actual bathroom to use? The space station does. I have a video to show you what that looks like.
Here we are at the throne. This is awesome. You might see the little, you might have noticed the little moon on the outside. This is our orbital outhouse right here. And of course, it serves for 2 functions. Number 2, right here. I'll show you. But you see it's pretty small, so you have to have pretty good aim, and you'll be ready to make sure things get let go the right direction. And it smells a little bit, so I'm closing it up. And that's, of course, for number 2. And this guy right here is for number 1. So they're sort of 2 slightly separate functions, but you can do a little, essentially both, by hanging on right here and doing number 1 and number 2. I might add it's color coded, so you really don't get it mixed up, which is nice. This is yellows for number 1.
They also needed a way to heat their food. There's no way those astronauts are going to work up there all that time eating yucky food. They actually had pretty good food up there.
Here's a pretty cool place. This is sort of like in your house where everybody meets in the morning. After you wash your face, brush your teeth, you want to find something for breakfast. And this is our kitchen. You might notice there's all sorts of foods here. It's like opening the refrigerator. You got all your different stuff that you want to have: drinks, meats, eggs, vegetables, cereals, bread, snacks. And that's a good place. That's where you find all the candy. Side dishes, and then some little power bars just in case. So we have all this type of food. Some of it is dehydrated, and so we have to hydrate it, fill it up with water. Some of it is all ready-made, and then all we have to do is heat it up. So something like this, I'm pulling out barbecued beef brisket. Pretty yummy.
On top of that, scientists had a way to bring new food up to the astronauts, so they were able to have fresh fruits and vegetables. Yum, yum, yum. One thing that could be a real problem up in the International Space Station was getting enough water. Water is super duper heavy. It's hard to bring it up into space. You can't bring enough water up for all those astronauts. You'd have to be flying up there all the time. So scientists came up with a way to solve that problem. Turns out the biggest source of water, of wastewater up in the space station, came from astronaut pee. Yes, we in our bodies pee out a lot of water. So scientists came up with a way to collect this liquid, spin it, clean it, and reuse it as drinking water. All the water up on the space station is reused because otherwise they would not have enough water. Life up here on the space station turns out to be pretty cool. You don't have to wear a spacesuit because the whole station is pressurized and heated, and there's air. What an awesome place to work, right? Cool thing about the space station is that astronauts could use all surfaces, ceiling, floor, walls. Without any gravity, you could put things anywhere, and all the astronauts would have to do is turn to face that. There's no up, there's no down. Let's take a look at what it's like to sleep in space.
So this is Node 2. This is a really cool module. Of course, most of these modules you'll see they have 4 sides, and they're put together. That way we could sort of work on a flat plane, either a wall, a floor, another wall, or the ceiling. But you know, again, all you have to do is turn yourself and your reference changes. The reason I'm bringing that up is because this is where 4 out of 6 of us sleep. And so people always ask about sleeping in space. Do you lie down? Are you in a bed? Not really, because it doesn't matter. You don't really have the sensation of lying down. You just sit in your sleeping bag. So here's one sleep station right here. I'm going in right now. You can follow me if you want. So I'm inside. It's sort of like a little phone booth, but it's pretty comfy. I've got a sleeping bag right here that we sleep in, so we don't have sort of like a little bit of a cover. We don't fly all over the place. But you know, you can sleep in any orientation. I have it sleeping, feeling like I'm standing up right now, but like you saw, I'm on the floor. But it doesn't matter if I turn over and I sleep upside down. I can't have it. I don't have any sensation in my head that tells me that I'm upside down, so it really doesn't matter. The sleep station is also like a little office. We've got a computer in here. As you can see, we've got a couple little toys. I've got some books. I've got some clothes and other things that make it sort of like home. I'm coming out. And just for reference, that's one sleep station. This one's another, right here. There's one on the ceiling, if you want to call it, right here. And then there's a 4th on the other wall over here. So all of us sleep in a little bit of a circle.
So the shuttle system was actually used for a really, really long time. But like anything else, it got old. And so finally, NASA said, we can't trust these ships anymore. Things are going to start breaking down. We need to retire them. And those ships went off and are sitting in museums right now. For a long time, America didn't have a way to send its own astronauts up. We relied on other countries to do that for us. But just recently, that all changed. A company called SpaceX designed a brand new rocket system and a new crew capsule. It was tested recently, and it was a big success. The capsule was called the Dragon. Let's take a look.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Stage 1. We have liftoff of the Falcon 9. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Starting pitch kick. Reactor power systems are nominal.
Set to turn.
Dragon solar rated limit. Solar has deployed.
They're initiating the capture of the Dragon. Standing by. Capture is confirmed.
Houston Station, looks like we got us a Dragon by the tail. spent quite a bit of time poking around in here this morning, just looking at the engineering and the layout, and I'm very pleased. So flying up in a human-rated Dragon is not going to be an issue.
Project time! You're going to need this template for your art project. If you're at school, your teacher will have it. If you're at home, take a screenshot. It's best if you can print it on something a little thicker like cardstock. Okay, here's what you're going to need to build your very own space transportation system, the shuttle and all the boosters. You're going to need the template, which you should have just printed from the previous screen, or if you're at school, your teacher will give this to you. White paper for the solid rocket boosters, black paper to make the shuttle's engines, a toilet paper tube to make the shuttle's bay, and then if you are going to make the big fuel tank, you're going to need a large tube as well, which could be 2 of these taped together. You're going to need a black crayon, 2 markers kind of stuck together, used to roll something around it, scissors, tape, and an optional Sharpie. So, you ready? Let's get started. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is I have to color in my special tiles, my heat tiles on the bottom of the shuttle. What color do you see? They're black. Now you don't want to leave any holes or your shuttle's going to burn up on re-entry. So, take your template, and I've cut it in half because I'm only making 1. Turn it over, that's the top. Turn it over to the bottom. It's white. We have to color that in. And it doesn't matter if you've kind of sketched around like that. You can go outside the lines because you're going to color it out. You're going to cut it out anyway. So I'm just going to color real fast here. If you would rather cut it out first so you know where you have to color, that's fine. I like to kind of just do it this way. I'll get most of it done this way, and then I'll color the rest of the way after I've cut it out. Okay. Make sure it's nice and colored in there. That's going to be pretty close. Now, I'm going to cut on the black lines all the way around the edge. Ta-da! Now I'm going to turn it over and see if I missed any spots. Ooh, I did. Do not want my shuttle to burn up on re-entry. If you're really patient, you can color this super dark. Super dark. I'm in a little bit of a hurry for this video, so I didn't. But I do want to make sure it's all the way colored in. Okay, next I have to make the body. The body is going to be made out of this paper, this toilet paper tube. So you might need a big person to help you with this one. I got to cut it in half. So I have half a tube, like this. See? And now I'm going to use my marker. This is where the optional marker comes in. I guess you could use the crayon too. Let's try it. I'm going to make a line down the middle. Yeah, the crayon works. To be the bay doors, because they open up, right? There's my bay door. Okay, next I need to make my engines. For that, I'm going to use my black paper. My engines are a little bit round, so I'm going to use this marker to help me. I don't need this whole black paper, just a little bit. I'm going to put my marker on the end of the shorter of the two, and I'm going to roll it around. And before I tape it, I'm actually just going to cut it because I don't want this whole paper. I end up with a piece about that big. And now I'm going to roll it around my marker, keep it kind of tight. I'm going to use my tape to tape it shut. I'm going to tape it all along the edge. Okay? Now, I'm going to pull the marker out. And I have a nice tube. I need 3 engines, 3 main engines. And these engines are going to be about as long as that. maybe about halfway along the grown-up finger. I need 3 of them. 1, 2, and 3. And it doesn't matter if they're all exactly the same size because we're going to fix that in a minute. There's my 3 engines, 3 little tubes. If they come unrolled, roll them back up and tape them again. Okay? And now I'm going to put my engines on my shuttle. I've got my 3 little engines. I'm going to start with 2 of them. And I'm going to lay them so that the ends, remember I didn't cut these quite the same size. Oops, that's okay. When I get to here, I'm going to lay them so they're hanging off the edge a little bit, just right there in the middle of the shuttle. And I'm going to tape them down. Oops, there we go. Just like that. That's okay if they're not even. See, they kind of hang off the end just a little bit. They don't have to, but mine do. I got to add the 3rd one. Get some more tape. 3rd one's going to go on top like a little pyramid, just like that. Ta-da! 3 engines. See? Now I'm ready for the bay. I'm going to stick this over the top. It does smush it down a little bit, but that's okay. And mostly I just want to make sure it's kind of close to the windows. I don't want it way back here. That's going to look weird. And if I put it too forward, then the engines are sticking out. So I just want to cover my engines. And I guess this side's a little bigger, so maybe I'll flip it around. Then you're going to take a really big piece of tape and go right over the top of that. And then, so that's not so wibbly wobbly, I'm going to put 1 more piece of tape over the top here and wrap it around. Ta-da! And there's your orbiter, part 1 of your space transportation system. Now, if you want to, you can decorate the rest of the shuttle any way you want to. Stickers, colors, paints, go crazy. I'm going to leave mine just like this. Now we're going to make the rest of the space transportation system. Okay, for the next part of this, you're going to need the white paper and the large tube. The large tube is going to be the external fuel tank. If you have time, energy, and desire, you can color this thing. Crazy color orange. You can paint it. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave it as a paper towel tube. We also have to make our solid rocket boosters to go on the side, and that's where our markers are going to come in handy again. We're going to need 2 pieces of paper that are about as big as rolling around the marker once. So I'm going to double those. 1, 2. I guess that turns out to be about 1/3 of the paper, if anybody cares. There we go. So I can cut that paper into 3. I'm going to not need that one. Let's take this one. I want the bottom of my solid rocket boosters actually have a line on it, right? It's the engines. They're black. So I'm going to take my crayon and I'm going to color the bottom black. That's the engines. And you don't have to go all the way to the edge because it's going to wrap around. I'm also going to make a line, a couple lines on there because there's lines on the other one too. You don't have to do that, but I want mine to look super cool. I'm going to try that. If you want your engines to be rainbow colored, go ahead and color them rainbow colored. This is your rocket. And then I'm going to wrap it around just like I did with my shuttle engines. I don't need to put quite as much tape on here because I'm not going to cut it up in pieces. So I'm just going to tape it twice. And then I'm going to pull my marker out. And then I'm going to do the other one. All right, so you can leave it at that, or if you want, you can kind of squash the end and kind of mash it into some kind of triangle shape so it looks like a rocket nose. Tape it shut. Doesn't matter how perfect that is. Mine's not perfect. So I just squashed it and then I kind of folded in the corners a little bit so it sort of was triangular shape. If you need a big person to help you with this, that's fine. Ta-da! So now I have my 2 solid rockets and I have my central tank. Okay? I got to put them together. Just going to get a big piece of tape. And I'm going to tape my solid rocket booster onto the fuel tank, the external fuel tank. I'm going to tape the other one on too on the exact opposite side. Okay, so this is what I have. I have my fuel tank and my solid rocket boosters. If that's wibbly wobbly like mine is, I'm just going to add another piece of tape. I don't want that guy falling off. Or maybe I do if I'm going to have him fall off for pretending, but I'm not. All right, and now I just have to add my shuttle. This part you might need a grown-up for, unless you know how to do this yourself, to roll the tape, make a little tapey thing, stick it on there, And ba-boom! Ta-da! You have just made your very own space transportation system. 2 solid rocket boosters, external fuel tank, and your orbiter. Well, that's all I have this week on the Space Transportation System, the International Space Station, and the new Dragon Crew module. Have fun playing with your own little space transportation system. Space is so cool. And science is cool.